I'm super nervous. Yeah, I don't take it lightly. When Keith asked me to speak, I got really nervous and I hesitated to even text him back. But I knew I'd have to see him. He's my father-in-law. So I was like, well, I guess I'll text him back. Because I don't take it lightly. I don't take standing in front of you guys lightly. I've come up here, for little things here and there, but I've really only ever spoken to teenagers. So I'm honored. And when he asked me to speak, just to be honest, I was having a rough time. And I was like, God, are you sure? Because I don't feel like I'm worthy. And I still don't feel worthy, but yeah. And then I got here tonight, and then worship happened, and that was great. And God reminded me that He knows me. Then Toby gets up, and he reminds us that we're worthy. So I don't take it lightly. I don't want y'all to think that for anything, but I do need to do something before I start, and that is to pray. So if everybody would just bow your heads. God, I thank you for this day, and I thank you for an amazing time in your presence. Thank you for this opportunity. I'll just say it a third time. I don't take it lightly. God, just use me. Let it be your words and not mine. God, I love you so much. Thank you for your presence. In your name I pray. Amen. So, if Magoo, will you put my title slide up here? So, over studying and praying and just spending time in the Word, I felt like God wanted me to speak on identity, and I was like, oh, okay, well, all right. And I just kept praying about it, and studying and just praying, and then so I've been using my mom's Bible for this particular message. I just chose to use her Bible to study instead of my phone. It felt easier. And so she had this bookmark sticking out of the back. I didn't really pay attention to it. To be honest, I didn't really want to look at it because I was like, just every little thing that reminds you kind of makes you sad a little bit, And so I didn't really look at it. And so I was like, God, this was, a week ago. And then Thursday or Friday of this week, I was doing my devotional and praying in the morning and reading my Bible, and something about that bookmark caught my eye. And so I was like, I'm just going to pull it out and see what it says. And so I pulled it out of my mom's Bible, and it says, truths to claim about your identity. So I was like, well, thank you, God, and thank you, Mom, because that was really a great confirmation. I just needed to share that because I just thought that was super cool. So my question is, where do we get our identity? We can have many titles. We are parents. You're a son, a daughter, a spouse, a friend, an employee, a boss, a sister, a brother, nurse, fireman, electrician, teacher, pastor. And those are titles. And sometimes I got to thinking, this is just kind of a side note. I thought, how many times do those little parts of your identity, those particular things kind of enhance or bleed over into other parts of your life? Like you're a parent, so you get so used to that you start parenting your spouse. Not me. Not me. Or you're a boss at the job, that you do. So you start treating your family like employees. Or you're a friend and you see yourself as a really good friend, but that bleeds over and you start treating your kids like they're your friends and not your children. Or, and sometimes in my case, in other cases, you're a nurse. So you start diagnosing your friends and family. It happens. It happens. So I want to start with my testimony, parts of it. So when I was 3 years old, my parents divorced. I don't really have recollection of them ever being together, but that didn't change my desire for my parents to love each other. This was the first time that I knew abandonment. As a little girl, I remember wishing that my dad would just stay when he would come to visit or to drop me off from a weekend visit. I wanted both my parents in the same house and with me all the time. I remember hanging on my dad's leg, begging him not to leave as he was trying to leave the house from a drop-off. See, my dad lived in Texas, and then later on he moved to Northwest Arkansas, but to a little girl that both of those places seem worlds away. And he was what some people would call a workaholic. My dad was raised in a super small town in southeast Oklahoma. He was raised with 14 brothers and sisters, so he was taught to work. My dad dropped out of school in the 8th grade so that he could work and help support his family. So that's what he knew. So that's what he did all the time. So I don't have many memories of my dad not working. He would just take me to work with him. So that's how we spent our quality time together. My dad owned a fence company, so I was mixing cement and picking up scrap wood by about the age of 7 or 8. And that continued into my early teen years. And I just remember begging him to please not work for one day. I just wanted his undivided attention. So instead, I could either go to work with him and get that quality time, or I could stay back when I got older. I could stay at home. And see, my mom's house was a little bit different than my dad's. My mom raised my brother and I on her own for several years. She remarried when I was 12, but that wasn't necessarily a good time in my life either, but that's a story for another day. My mom's single parenting days were hard. Money was tight, and she did the best she could with what she had. She was also a young single mom who liked to occasionally go out dancing with some of her girlfriends. She didn't go often, but I remember crying every time she did because I didn't want her to leave. See, my mom was raised with 4 younger sisters, and her mom and dad were really tough on them in different ways with each of them. When I hear stories of their lives growing up, I hear good and bad, and the bad usually consists of how tough my grandpa was on them. See, my parents were doing the best job of parenting that they knew how to do with the tools that they were given, and in some areas they weren't given many tools. So not necessarily, though, to the fault of my grandparents, who also were doing the best job that they knew how to do. I needed and craved attention from both of my parents. I didn't want them out of my sight for fear of them leaving me. So sometimes when my mom would go out with her friends, she would either get a babysitter or we stayed with a family member. And I never wanted to go to this particular family member's house. My mom always just chalked it up to me wanting to always be with her. She would say that it was because I was afraid I was going to miss out on something. She wasn't wrong. But what she didn't know was at this particular family member's house, I was being touched inappropriately by the man of the house. Later, when that all came to light, that he was doing the same thing to other family members, I could see that so many people were so upset, and it scared me. So when I was asked directly if anything had ever happened to me, I lied. I was about 8 years old at that time. I was 29 years old before I ever told a soul. I kept that secret to myself for over 20 years. And I became self-reliant at a very young age because I didn't feel protected. And secrecy helped shape my life for many years, through some vital years of my life. When I was 17 years old and I was a senior in high school, I'd had a boyfriend for a couple years. Long story short, I became pregnant. I was really scared. I was scared to tell my dad. For fear of letting him down. And I was right. I did let him down. He was disappointed and he was mad, and it affected our relationship for the remainder of my pregnancy. I felt like a huge disappointment. To save some time, though, I'll tell you, he came around very shortly after Bryce was born, and they developed the best relationship. I felt like also as a teen mom that I had something to prove, so I clung on to that self-reliance again. I'm so thankful for the relationship that my dad and Bryce had and the renewed great relationship that he and I had. Because 7 short years later, my dad was diagnosed with lung cancer, and then 8 months after that, he passed away. I felt abandoned. Fast forward a few years. I'd been a single mom for about 8 years. I met this guy, we started dating, and it was a whirlwind relationship that moved very quickly, too quickly. We started dating, got engaged, and married within 5 months. Red flags were everywhere, but I couldn't see them for the roses that he planted with manipulation and gaslighting. I remember the first time that I was scared of him, but he convinced me that the anger toward me was my fault. He wasn't physical with me that time, but his anger made me nervous. And this was 3 weeks before we were to get married. I went ahead with the marriage believing that it was a one-time thing and it would never happen again. The first time he got physical with me was about 1 month after we got married. Again, that was my fault. I won't spend too long telling you the many stories of physical, emotional, mental abuse or gaslighting, manipulation, lying, accusations, cheating, threats of suicide, isolation from my family and friends, financial abuse. But for 4 years, I endured it all. I was again self-reliant and secretive. I prayed that God would get me out of that situation because I truly believed if he didn't, it would have ended in a murder-suicide situation. I saw a door open on July 28th, 2016, and I left and I got my son out of a terrible situation, and I didn't look back. I started my life over in every sense of the saying. I was self-reliant again. I moved back to Podo and started attending Covenant Church regularly in early 2017. God also began restoring my relationship with my family, my mom in particular. Our relationship had suffered greatly. By this time, my mom had been sick for a few years, and she had developed a neurological disorder that was never given a definitive diagnosis. This disorder took away her ability to walk or talk clearly. It basically took away her ability to fully care for herself, much less do anything that she enjoyed, like shopping, get her nails done, watching her grandsons play ball, any of those things. But God restored our relationship. It wasn't perfect, but it was restored. And I had rededicated my life to God. I was baptized, became a member of Covenant Church, and was seeing God working daily in my life. I was learning to trust God for all things. So I met Aaron here at church. And to save time, I won't tell you all the ways that God orchestrated that and how many times our paths should have crossed over the years, but they didn't. He and I became friends. We kind of liked each other, so we decided that we wanted to spend more time together as friends and see if dating was something that we wanted to do. And of course, we started dating. I developed new friendships through church, and I was learning what it meant to have a church family. I felt accepted and supported. Then on May 6th, 2019, my mom passed away unexpectedly. And I was angry, and I was sad. I felt abandoned again. Aaron, my family, friends, and my church family showed me what having family meant. They surrounded me with love and support. On October 19th, 2019, Aaron and I got married. My son stood in the place of my dad and gave me away, and we honored both of my parents in our wedding by saving them seats. Then at the beginning of 2020, Aaron and I found out we were pregnant. And then shortly after that, we lost our baby, and I nearly lost my life. I felt angry, and I felt betrayed because I knew what God had promised us. I became angry, bitter, withdrawn, and honestly, I was jealous of people who were pregnant and having babies for a while. So you see, my identity has changed throughout my life. I am a daughter, I'm a parent, I'm a spouse, I'm a friend, but I've also called myself abandoned, self-reliant, a disappointment, angry, jealous. But who does God say that I am? So Galatians 3:26 says that I'm a child of God. Romans 8:1-2 says I'm accepted. Psalms 139:13-16 says I'm beautiful. Romans 8:32 says I'm blessed. Isaiah 62:5 says I'm a bride of Christ. 2 Thessalonians 2:13 says I'm chosen. Proverbs 8:35 says I'm favored. Psalms 103:12 says I'm forgiven. John 8:36 says I'm free. Proverbs 31:30 says I'm God-fearing. Ephesians 1:7 says I'm redeemed. Ephesians 4:13 says I'm victorious. And Romans 5:6-8 says I'm worth it. So do we embrace our God-given identity? So I've been studying the book of Daniel, thanks to Brent, who mentioned it a couple weeks ago in youth and was like, hey, if y'all haven't read Daniel in a while, you really should. And I was like, oh, I downloaded a devotional right then and started just studying the whole book of Daniel. So I've been studying the book of Daniel recently. Essentially, the book of Daniel shows us that even when the worst things imaginable happen, God is still in control. And that despite what it looks like, that he's still on the throne. So just a few things about Daniel. So he refused to eat the king's unclean food. And because of his faith, God made it so that he grew fat from nothing but water and greens. When I read that, I was like, that would be my luck. That's how I'd be blessed. I'd grow fat from eating nothing but water and greens. Really? But that was a blessing. God also used Daniel to interpret the king's dream when no one else could. Daniel was, in the most famous story that we know, that Daniel was thrown in the lion's den because he prayed when it was forbidden. And because of his faith, God sent angels and shut the mouths of the lions. So Daniel never compromised his belief. His faith was evident through his whole story. So Daniel was told specifically how God saw him. There were 3 separate times that he was told, you are treasured by God. And so I feel like sometimes we put more stock in the identity that we give ourselves because we aren't hearing God tell us specifically or audibly. So we identify ourselves as a spouse, a parent, a fireman, electrician, whatever, or bitter, angry, abandoned, unloved. Instead of the identity that God gives us, which is chosen, accepted, blessed, redeemed, beautiful, free, and worth it. I just want to go back to, do we embrace our God-given identity? Do we believe who God says we are? And if you don't, you need to, I'm talking to myself, grow in your faith. And so, how do we grow in our faith? Prayer. You want to know what God says about you? Ask him. Daniel was disciplined when it came to prayer. He knew how important it was to have that direct line to God wide open all the time. He prayed 3 times a day, no matter what. He prayed even when it was forbidden. So the second way is reading your Bible. Because faith, it comes alive when you read your Bible. The Bible shows us God's provision, healing. He shows us miracles. But it also shows us who God is. Because God he's Jehovah Jireh. He's our provider. So I'm not self-reliant. He is Jehovah Shalom, our peace. So I am not abandoned. He is Jehovah Nisi, our victory. I am not anger. He is Jehovah Rapha, our healer, and I am not jealousy. And the third way is through fellowship. You have to stay active in order to grow your faith. You can't just go to church on Sunday. It doesn't work that way. We need the support of people who live for and love Jesus. And we need to have truth spoken over us. We need that. We need fellowship. Sometimes we cling to the identity we give ourselves, especially when times gets hard. It's easy to retreat and let the enemies get in our head and take us back to the place of feeling abandoned, like a disappointment. I gave you 13 examples of what God says about you, but there's so many more. So we have to start believing what he says about us and start tearing down the lies of the enemy. We won't be able to walk in our callings or giftings until we walk in who he says we are. We want revival. We say that all the time, that we want revival. But it starts with having enough faith to believe what God says about us and then walking that out. So that I can speak, I'm just speaking from experience that it's easier to go back to retreat and go back to what we believe about ourselves. Over the last, couple months, I've had a rough time. I'm sure people have seen it. People who really know me can tell. 18 months of trying to get pregnant catches up with you. You start to feel like your body's failing you. You're failing your spouse. You're not being, or like you start to believe that it's never going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's not for us. Like, what, and you get angry. And I was to a place where I couldn't even pray about it anymore. I couldn't. I was too mad. And the way that I explained it to my husband was like, when you're mad at somebody, you don't want to talk to him, and I'm mad at God right now. So I don't want to talk to him. And I was serious. I was in a place where I didn't want to read my Bible. I didn't want to listen to worship music. I didn't want to pray. I just didn't. I knew that I should. I did. I knew that that's what I needed to be doing. And my husband reminded me every single time. He would say, you know what you need to do? You need to dig deeper. You need to dig in. You need to dig in. And I got to a place where I was like, I don't want to hear that. I know what you're going to say. I know what I need to do, but I don't want to hear it. I'm angry. I'm angrier than I've ever been. I'm angry that I don't have parents here. I'm angry that we lost a baby. I'm angry that we're not getting pregnant. I'm angry, Aaron. That's what I would say. I'm just angry. I don't know how to explain it. I'm just angry. I caught myself walking around. I'm just being really transparent here. I was jealous of everybody. If you had a mom or a dad, I was jealous of you. If you had a baby, I was jealous of you. If you're pregnant, I was jealous of you. Every relationship that I saw, mom and daughter relationship, made me mad. Every relationship with a dad made me mad. And I isolated. Not physically, because I have to be here. But I did. I withdrew. I was like, I couldn't do it. So I would just mentally check out. I'd be there present, but mentally I was checked out. And so Keith asked me at the right time to speak because I had to dig in. I had to dig in. And so I don't feel like that anymore, just so y'all know. I'm not in that place. I'm fine. I'm not angry. I have moments where I'm a little bit angry, but I'm not in that place anymore. I'm not so angry that I can't read my Bible. I'm not so angry that I can't listen to worship music. I'm not so angry that I can't pray. I just really fed into what the enemy was doing, and he was using every little thing he knew. He was putting a spotlight on parental relationships with their children. He was putting a spotlight on people who had babies and being like, that's what you don't have, So this is all coming from what God has been speaking to me, because I need to remember who he says I am. He does say, he says that I'm redeemed. He says that I'm not abandoned. He says that I'm chosen, that I'm loved. He says all those things. Now it's just a matter of deciding to believe it. So my last point is a quote I just want to leave with you, that we can't wait until life isn't hard anymore to decide to believe who God says we are and to start walking it out in our daily lives. Because there's never going to be a time when life's not hard. And it's a choice whether or not we allow the enemy to come in and start lying to us, and we start believing who he says we are instead of who God says we are. Aaron, if you want to come up here. I just hope, I know it was short and sweet, but I just hope that maybe through my testimony, honestly, through my testimony, I really just I wasn't going to share my testimony. I wasn't. And then I decided that I should, because I think it gives people more of a glimpse into who I am and how I am and why I am the way I am certain ways, But then it also gives people, somebody may relate to that. Somebody may be like, oh, I needed to hear that. I needed to, I've been through that thing before. And it's hard. I'm not somebody who's vulnerable easily. But I hope that it meant something to someone. I hope somebody heard something they needed. I just want so much for every single person here to know who God says they are. Because you're not abandoned, you're not unloved, you're not the things of your past. You're not who you were. I'm not who I am, or who I am. I'm not who I was. I am who I am. I'm not who I was. So I hope that it meant something to somebody. That's all I got. I don't.
Hey, if we'll remain standing, and you guys, if you'll bring the lights down.